It's been a few months since Gotham Knights has been announced, and one thing that we don't have tons of confirmations on yet is the villains that will be involved with the game. So tonight I'd like to go through 8 villains that have been teased or confirmed to some extent. And before I get into this, I want to make it absolutely clear that this is not a list of confirmed villains, this is not some leaked list of villains or anything like that. These are villains that have either been directly confirmed by what we've seen in the trailers or villains that have been teased to any extent, really. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories, but I am talking about potential characters, locations, or thugs that are pretty much direct name drops to these villains existing in this universe. And so these are 8 villains that we could possibly see. And before I get into this list, I would just like to ask you guys to leave in the comments, which villains would you like to see in Warner Brothers Games Montreal's upcoming Batman-esque game that, of course, does not star Batman. Also, if I missed any villains when making this list, feel free to let me know that in the comments as well, as I'd love to see if there were more villains that were teased that I just missed. These are the 8 that I picked up on, but if you saw more, feel free to let me know. But let's start in at number 8 with the Court of Owls. And the Court of Owls have been confirmed really since before this game was even announced, before DC Fandom, before the trailer or anything. Warner Brothers Games Montreal entire marketing campaign relied upon the Court of Owls. They showed symbols for the Court of Owls. They dressed up as the Court of Owls at a party and took pictures to put on Facebook at one point. And so we knew that regardless of what this was, that the Court of Owls would be involved to some capacity, and then this was confirmed in the trailer when they showed the Court of Owls in full as an epilogue to the trailer. There was a good 20 seconds where they just introduced the Court of Owls, really emphasized their importance of the story, and I'm not sure if they'll be the main villains of the game or if they're trying to pull kind of a Mr. Negative that Spider-Man PS4 did, where they emphasize a secondary villain and make it look like they are the main villain so that they can pull out a surprise villain at the end. But either way, they're going to have a very prominent role in this game. At number 7, I have Mr. Freeze, who was also confirmed in both the trailer and in the gameplay demo. They showed a boss fight with Mr. Freeze, and they gave us some pretty interesting information regarding him, which is that he is one of many villain quests that you can embark upon, and they showed the gameplay demo with Batgirl and Robin, where they said that it was about halfway through his villain side quest and really made it sound as though there are going to be multiple of these. And so the structure of this game is very likely that you will have different villains, multiple different villains that you are trying to investigate and ultimately take down. And each of them are operating fairly individually, but also that there will be multiple of them to take down. Mr. Freeze looks like he has a pretty interesting plan going on. We didn't get too much information, however, we saw a boss fight take place, we saw a lot of events leading up to it, and I was honestly really impressed at just how robust this mission was for what sounds like is essentially a glorified side mission that will, I'm sure, bleed into the main story as well. But it will definitely be interesting to see Mr. Freeze and the variation between this version and the Arkham version. At number 6, I have Anarky, and really the only reason is because these thugs look like Anarky thugs. Anarky has not yet been confirmed, but his presence would make sense in the story. And a lot of villains, I think, will actually have very interesting roles in this story. One thing that Patrick Redding has said in interviews, that one of the ideas that they got to play around with is how Batman's villains suddenly adapt now that Batman is dead, and how their identities are challenged and how they kind of have to change who they are. But Anarky would make a lot of sense to come out of the woodwork as everything is kind of going down in Gotham, and as the Court of Owls are trying to establish their order in the city and their command over everything. It would be an interesting polarity to watch Anarky and his attempt to do basically the complete opposite. And as I go through the rest of these villains, I just think that each one would be so interesting because each of them has such an interesting relationship to Batman that it will be interesting to see how their motivations and characterization changes and how they can build rivalries with the sidekicks. At number 5, I have Two-Face, and this was back when they were releasing promotional images, getting everybody ready for the trailer at DC Fandom. And one of the images, as they were doing the countdown, said face to face, and I do not think that this was an accident. I think that they are, in fact, teasing Two-Face. Once again, it's interesting because he generally has a very strong connection to Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne to an extent, and both of them are apparently dead in this universe. So I would like to see what can be done with Two-Face. Another thing is that I don't feel like he was necessarily done justice in the Arkham games, so I feel like a game where so many different villains are getting such robust quests that take hours to complete would be a far better way to explore his character and really get to know this version of him. So I have Poison Ivy listed at number 4, and this one mainly comes from some concept art that Warner Brothers Games Montreal uploaded to the Gotham Knights page, which is that of a diner called Pamela's Diner, and the name Pamela is written in green, and there's definitely a good chance that I'm just reading way too much into this because I've spent years on the scavenging trail, where anytime any WB Montreal employee has said literally anything, I read way too much into it and try to deduce what they're working on and which characters are involved. But once again, I think that this is something that can be read into. I don't know why they would just randomly upload some diner that has no significance to the story or characters. And once again, you have to recognize that these studios are always just so detail-oriented that, once again, I feel like it's not a mistake that this name is here and that it's the color that it is. So I think that there's definitely a possibility that Poison Ivy will have a role in this game. Ra's al Ghul is at number 3, and this is another villain that has been teased before the game was even announced. Back when they were just first showing us some of the symbols, they showed what appears to be the Demon's Head symbol, which is of course a reference to the League of Assassins, which is of course led by Ra's al Ghul. And additionally, on the official Gotham Knights website, the Red Hood biography tells us that Jason Todd, like in the comics, was murdered and then brought back to life by one of Batman's most dangerous foes, which is of course a reference to Ra's al Ghul, unless for whatever reason they decided to change the lore, which is definitely a possibility. This is their own unique take on the character. However, I would be a little bit surprised if Ra's al Ghul is not involved to some capacity because, as I mentioned, he seems as though he's been fairly heavily teased. And with Batman gone, it, like many other villains, would be interesting to see how his motivation changes. A lot of time, his motivation is trying to get Batman to become his successor, and it would also be interesting if Talia is involved, or if Damian is involved to some degree. Like many others, I am fairly suspicious that Bruce Wayne is not actually dead in this universe and that they'll bring him back for DLC or a sequel or something like that. But if he is in fact dead, it would be interesting to see what they could do with their version of the lore, because you look at characters like Talia al Ghul and Damian Wayne, and they have very distinct paths that involve Bruce, and so if he's no longer in this universe, it could be interesting to see how that changes, and it would give Warner Brothers Games Montreal a lot more creative freedom and allow them to really explore some uncharted territory in the Batman mythology. So my final 2 picks are probably the biggest stretches in this video. The Poison Ivy one is arguably a stretch as well, as is the Two-Face one. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, none of these guys are necessarily confirmed. These are just villains who have been teased. And at number 2, this is a villain who isn't even necessarily directly referenced, but they uploaded some concept art to Twitter showcasing that the building that Mr. Freeze has overtaken in the gameplay demo is the Elliott Center, which is a reference to Thomas Elliott, aka Hush. And like Joker, like Two-Face, he has a very strong connection to Bruce Wayne. And so it would be interesting to see how his character changes with Bruce dead. But like I mentioned, there's no real specific mention of Thomas in particular, and this could just be a location in the city. But it does imply that Thomas Elliott exists in this universe, and as a result, there's definitely a possibility that he could show up in the game. Okay, so finally at number 1, it's the villain that everybody says they don't want in the game, but if he's not in the game, everyone will get mad and say that he should have been in the game, and that is Joker. And I'm personally of the opinion that I would be interested to see what Warner Brothers Games Montreal could do with their interpretation of Joker. Obviously, this would not be the Arkham interpretation of Joker, so they could do something very fresh, and I would like to see what they could do either in this game or in a sequel. But with that said, I do not think he should be the main villain. I don't think that he should have a role like he did in the Arkham games, where he's the architect of everything. I don't want Talon to take off his mask at the end of the game and have it be Joker. I don't want it to be revealed that Joker killed Batman. I don't want anything that dramatic. but I would like to see him in this game, and there's a lot of interesting dynamics that weren't explored in the Arkham games with Joker because it was so focused on his rivalry with Batman. However, in this universe, it's already been established that Jason Todd, like in the comics, was killed, and in the comics, he was killed by Joker. It's also already been established that Batgirl in this universe was indeed shot and paralyzed before she was able to rehabilitate herself and walk again, and once again, in the comics, this crime was committed by Joker in The Killing Joke. And so, kind of like Red Hood being resurrected, unless they decide to change the lore and change the villain that paralyzed her, which in my opinion would be a disservice to The Killing Joke, then it will be Joker. And even if he's not directly in this game, I have a feeling that there will at least be some subtext to his existence because he has caused so much pain for these characters in this universe. Obviously, if Red Hood has been killed and resurrected, if Barbara Gordon has been paralyzed, there's a lot that he's already done. And so it almost creates a moment that feels obligatory to us, the players, to really see the conclusion of some of these arcs that they're already starting to build. And whether or not that happens in this game, I don't think it's really significant. And they don't necessarily need him to have a physical presence for them to discuss what happened or for them to be able to internally overcome what happened. But I just think that there's a real opportunity to do something different and fresh with the character, especially if they don't make him the main villain. And I do think that he will have some really unique connections to these characters that weren't able to be explored in the Arkham universe because, once again, that was so focused on his rivalry to Bruce. So that's my list of 8 villains that have been teased for the Gotham Knights game. Once again, let me know what villains you'd like to see in the comments. Let me know if I missed any. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And thanks you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.